Hi, I'm Hannah Niles. I'm a senior here at Thornton Academy. Today I was interviewing Ed Pierce, the head editor at the Journal Tribune. He's been there for about 2.5 years and has been doing some great service for our community. When you were younger, you mentioned how you won an essay contest and you were able to beat Bobby Kennedy, correct? Bobby Kennedy?
Bobby Kennedy?
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
And how did that moment shape you?
It had a lot to do with who I am today, because when I didn't know who my United States Senator was, but when I found that I was going to be reading it for Robert Kennedy, who had been the brother of the president, then I was like, oh yeah, it's pretty impressive. So when I had a conversation with him, he talked a lot about my future and what I wanted to do, and he said something to me that has stuck with me my entire career as a journalist, now 43 years, which is, you can go to college and you can learn a lot of things, but the one thing that they can't teach you is talent. And he thought I had a talent for writing and storytelling. So what he actually suggested that I explore a career in journalism, and it set my life on a path of my life's work.
Also, like, going off of that, like, you always have role models in your life, and how growing up, like, it kind of helps, like you said, kind of determine what you want to do. So when was it the moments after you met him that you kind of figured out that's what you want to do, or was it a little bit after that?
Probably a little bit after that, because I had a paper route, and at that time there were 2 newspapers in the town I grew up in. And I actually, when I got off of school, would deliver papers for the afternoon paper, the evening paper. And on my paper route, there was a journalist, and I knew he was a journalist. He was a TV reporter for the ABC affiliate in the city I grew up in. And his name was Tom Schell, and he was a news reporter, so I was able to sort of like pick his brain about the profession, but also about colleges. So the one thing that Tom Schell was able to help me with was to sort through smaller schools that had great journalism departments, so I could save a little bit on the cost of my education, but also I kind of became, to choose a school where I could be a big fish in a little pond instead of, lost in a sea of, thousands of students. And so I chose to go to a small school, New Mexico Highlands University at first, and then I transferred several years later to the University of New Mexico.
So you're talking about the University of New Mexico, that's actually one of our questions, but going off of that, do you believe that a degree in journalism is necessary to have a career in journalism?
It's certainly helpful.
Yeah.
I have worked with people who did not have a degree in journalism, but and that's not to say that you can't become a journalist otherwise, but it's the things that I learned in journalism school are experiences that have stuck with me to this very day. Yeah. So I would say not necessary, but important that you at least have some journalism classes.
Yeah. We also looked into the fact that you were a public affairs specialist for the Air Force, yes. And that's very interesting, and that's something we didn't really get to touch on last week. Yes. So have you traveled anywhere from that, and how has that impacted you personally?
When they found out that I had when I joined the Air Force, yep. I enlisted, and my goal was to travel overseas and see if the sun looked any different coming up on the other side of the world, and it doesn't. Yeah. It looks exactly the same. But I did, my very first assignment was to Germany, and I did a lot of writing for Stars and Stripes newspaper in Europe. So I did get to see a lot of Europe. I traveled to Denmark, the Netherlands, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece, a lot of Germany, and just telling stories of the men and women of the armed forces there. Also traveled to Iran. I was one of the last military personnel that helped to assist families that were leaving Iran when the Shah of Iran was overthrown in 1979. We had a strong military presence there, and so I was part of a team that went to help evacuate American military personnel and their belongings from Iran. I think that being a military journalist was also crucial to who I am as a journalist today, because you wear the uniform of the United States of America and as a military journalist, and there is no conservative or liberal. The main thrust of being a military journalist is objectivity, because you are a United States journalist, and you couldn't get way into politics or anything like that. That was part of the gig, and really that has stayed with me my entire career after, in that I choose not to be political.
We kind of talked last week about this again, but if you had to talk about your job in general, what's the best part, what's the worst part? Waking up in the morning, what are you looking to get out of the day from your job? And at the end of the day, is there anything negative that happens that you kind of have to sit back and reflect on?
Yeah. The best part of my job is not knowing from day to day what you're going to be facing that particular day. It's sort of like an adrenaline rush when the first story comes in, and it sets the tone for the rest of the day, because it's sort of like being a journalist and a print journalist is sort of like being a cop or a fireman. You never know from day to day what you're going to be working on that particular day, but you have to be good at it. So I really love that aspect of the job. You start every day with a clean slate, sort of like an artist, and then you tell a story about an event or something that happened that particular day. The worst part of the job is you see a lot of the best part of humanity, but you also see the worst part of humanity. I do not want to glorify accidents, and I'm in it to tell the complete story and not just pandering to the fact that there's a gruesome car accident just shamelessly for website clicks. We don't run, our newspaper does not run gory, bloody car crash photos, because my own father died was hit by a drunk driver and killed in the accident. So I kind of like to try to put myself in the place of those people and the experiences that they've had. So I'm respectful of that, and we don't run those sort of things.
Was there any time that you wanted to give up and quit and kind of just leave journalism as a whole and be like, what am I doing with my career?
Not ever leave journalism, but I have had instances in my career where I questioned what I was doing. I had the occasion in 1988, a story that I sort of lucked into. a young lady, 19 years old, was a part-time college student and also worked part-time in the mornings, would come home for lunch and have lunch with her mother every single day. And then they would go for hour-long bike ride on this desolate stretch of highway through the desert in New Mexico. And one day I was going to the police station and there was a couple, older couple, and they were crying coming out of the police station. So I asked the lieutenant, what are the people crying about? And what he told me was that their daughter, this young lady named Tara Calico, had gone missing. And so this became a massive story in Albuquerque, New Mexico area. And what had happened, they brought in, the state police had infrared helicopters looking for her. They found part of a cassette tape and a Walkman that she was listening to. They found pieces of her pink Huffy Roadmaster bike that she was riding, but they did not find her, and to this day they have not found her. So a few months later, there was a convenience store robbery across the country in Port St. Joe, Florida. And during the commission of that robbery and making the escape, the robbers fled to a white panel van, and the one jumped in the back of the panel van and slammed the door, and 2 Polaroid photos fell out into the parking lot of the convenience store. They were recovered by the police there, and the photos depicted a young boy between 9 or 10 years old, bound and gagged, next to, in the back of this panel van, a young lady who was also bound and gagged. Now, about a week after this young lady went missing, a young boy named Michael Henley went missing while camping with his father about 25 miles away. And so the mother of the Tara Calico, her name was Patty Dole. She called me up one day and she said, hey, have you seen this TV show called A Current Affair? And I said, nope, I'm working at that time that it comes on. And she said, well, one of my neighbors saw it and they think that the young lady depicted in this Polaroid photo is Tara. So I went with the mother to the TV station and she was convinced that it was her daughter. The parents of Michael Henley also were there that day. They were convinced that it was their son in the photo. And then it became the FBI looking into it. And the FBI examined the Polaroid photos and determined that with about 95% certainty it was their children. So they raided 4 or 5 houses in Florida looking for these kids and never found them. So on the anniversary, every year of the anniversary of their disappearance, I was sent to talk by the newspaper to talk to the family, who I became close with, and the newspaper wanted to know, how does the family feel after 1 year, after 2 years, after 3 years? And after 4 or 5 years, I was asked to go do the story, and I just felt that my heart wasn't in it, that I knew how the family felt. They were distraught and devastated. They spent their life savings trying to find their children and never did. And at that point, I decided that maybe I didn't want to get involved with news, so I kind of did a little shift in my career, and I spent the next 25 years of my career covering sports. As I got older, I kind of decided too that I didn't want to be out covering high school football games at 11:30 at night anymore. So that's after I got married, and so I decided that the best course of action for me was I was offered an editor's position, and so I decided to transition back into news and on to be a news editor.
Kind of closing in, looking ahead, when are you planning on retiring?
Well, right now I feel good. I don't have any health issues. Been doing this now. May will be 44 years into my career.
Wow.
And I started when I was 21 years old. So I would like to work for another 5 or 6 years, as long as I feel up to it. I feel I'm doing good work. I feel like the newspaper is benefiting from my experience, and I have told my family, though, that when I do retire, I don't plan on writing another news story. I might do a book, but this business that I'm in is a grind. Yeah. To tell you the truth, I can't remember like what I wrote about last week. I mean, you put the paper out every single day, and sometimes I write 2 or 3 stories for that particular issue. Some stories stick with you. You can remember the more interesting ones, but each day is a blur because you've got a deadline. You try to do the best work you possibly can that particular day, and you shove the paper out the door, and it's sort of like your stories become your children, and people may refer to them later, but the particular facts and stuff that you may not recall them off the top of your head, but each and every day, when you're writing that much, and I would say I've definitely gone over 10,000 stories that have been published in 43 years so far, that you remember the hardest ones, and you remember some of the most moving ones.
What do you want to leave as a lasting impact?
I got into this profession when I was told that I had potential to become a journalist by Robert Kennedy. What he told me, I carry with me to this very day, which is a journalist makes a difference in society. I would say, to answer your question, this is the legacy that I hope to leave behind, a legacy of service and making a change in our community.